I stared at the severance check on my desk, the numbers blurring as Marcus Weber's words echoed in my head. It's nothing personal, David. Just business. 12 years. I'd given this company 12 years of my life, turned the accounting department from a mess of mismanaged spreadsheets into a well-oiled machine. And now I was being replaced by Marcus's fresh-out-of-college son, Bradley, whose greatest achievement to date was maintaining a C-plus average while partying his way through business school. You'll stay through the end of the month to train Bradley, of course, Marcus continued, his practiced smile never wavering. We want to ensure a smooth transition. My name is David Chen, and at 42, I was about to learn that loyalty in business is a one-way street. As Chief Financial Officer of Weber Construction, I'd helped build a regional construction company into a $50 million enterprise. Now I was being discarded like last year's tax returns. Train Bradley, I repeated, my voice steady despite the anger churning in my stomach. The position of CFO requires more than just basic accounting knowledge, Marcus. It needs years of experience, industry connections. He waved his hand dismissively. Bradley's smart. He'll figure it out. Besides, he has fresh ideas, new perspectives. Sometimes change is good for a company. Fresh ideas. Right. I'd seen Bradley's idea of innovation during his summer internships. Elaborate schemes to maximize his father's tax deductions, most of them skirting the edge of legality. But Marcus had always laughed it off. The boy's got a mind for business, he'd say proudly. What about the Anderson merger? I asked, referring to the major deal we'd been working on for months. The due diligence alone requires. Bradley will handle it, Marcus interrupted. With your guidance, of course. That's why we're giving you such a generous severance package. I looked down at the check again. 6 months' salary, a golden parachute that was supposed to make up for more than a decade of dedication. For all the late nights, missed family dinners, and sacrificed weekends. I see, I said quietly. And I suppose the board approved this decision? Marcus's smile flickered slightly. The board trusts my judgment. Blood is thicker than water, David. Surely you understand wanting to give your child every advantage. I did understand. I had 2 kids of my own, teenagers who'd watched me pour my heart and soul into Weber Construction, believing that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded. What a joke that seemed now. Of course, I replied, carefully tucking the check into my jacket pocket. I'll start preparing the transition documents. Marcus beamed, already turning toward the door. Excellent. Bradley will be starting Monday. I know you'll show him everything he needs to know. As the door closed behind him, I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Show Bradley everything he needs to know. If only Marcus understood exactly what that meant. Because here's what Marcus Weber didn't know. I had been preparing for this day for months. The signs were there, the way he'd started bringing Bradley to board meetings, how he'd begun questioning my methods, the subtle hints about new blood in management. I hadn't survived this long in business by being naive. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to my wife, Sarah. It happened. Plan B. Her reply came instantly. Are you sure? Was I sure? I thought about all the times I covered for Marcus's creative business practices, the questionable contracts, the inflated bids, the convenient oversights and project reports. I documented everything, believing I was protecting the company. Now I realized I'd been protecting myself. Yes, I texted back. Time to open the vault. The vault wasn't a physical place. It was a secured cloud drive containing 12 years' worth of carefully organized evidence. Every email, every contract, every suspicious transaction I'd been asked to overlook. I'd started keeping records 3 years ago, when Marcus first began talking about Bradley's future in the company. Call it insurance. Call it paranoia. But I knew Marcus Weber well enough to know that loyalty only went one way with him. I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing my office, carefully sorting through files that would soon be Bradley's responsibility. On the surface, everything looked standard: profit and loss statements, vendor contracts, project budgets. But beneath that orderly facade lay a web of connections that only I fully understood. At 5 o'clock, Linda from HR appeared with my official termination paperwork. Her eyes were sympathetic as she handed me the folder. This isn't right, she whispered. Everyone knows Bradley isn't qualified. I signed where indicated, giving her a small smile. Things have a way of working out, Linda. But the Anderson merger, she hesitated. David, there are things about that deal that don't add up. Numbers that don't make sense. I'm sure Bradley will figure it out, I replied, echoing Marcus's words. He's got fresh ideas after all. Monday morning arrived with a peculiar sense of calm. I walked into Weber Construction at exactly 8 a.m., nodding to familiar faces who couldn't quite meet my eyes. Everyone knew about my impending departure, about Bradley's promotion. Office gossip travels fast. Bradley was already waiting in my office, practically bouncing with enthusiasm in his perfectly tailored suit. Mr. Chen. I brought coffee. He gestured to 2 cups from the expensive cafe down the street. Thanks, Bradley, I said, settling behind my desk for what would be one of my last times. And please call me David. We're going to be spending a lot of time together these next 2 weeks. He grinned, clearly trying to project confidence. Dad says you're the best person to learn from, that you know everything about the company's finances. Everything, I agreed quietly. Shall we begin? That evening, I drove home in a daze, the reality of my situation finally sinking in. Our house wasn't paid off yet. College funds for the kids weren't fully funded. The severance would help, but it wouldn't last forever. Sarah was waiting for me in the kitchen, a glass of wine already poured. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. Tell me, she said simply. I collapsed into a chair, suddenly exhausted. Bradley starts Monday. I'm supposed to train him on everything, 12 years of knowledge crammed into 2 weeks. Everything? She asked, emphasizing the word. That's what Marcus said. I took a long sip of wine. He wants a smooth transition. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She knew what that meant. Knew about the vault, about the evidence I'd been collecting. We discussed it countless times over the years, debating whether I was being paranoid or prudent. And the Anderson merger. Bradley's handling it now. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Marcus thinks he's ready. Sarah sat down across from me, her expression serious. David, you know what's in those merger documents. The discrepancies, the hidden clauses. If Bradley starts poking around without understanding. I know. I cut her off. But Marcus made his choice. He wants Bradley to learn everything. So teach him, she said quietly. Teach him exactly what his father's been hiding all these years. I looked at my wife, my partner in everything for 20 years, and saw the same determination in her eyes that I felt in my gut. This wasn't just about losing my job. This was about right and wrong, about consequences and accountability. It won't be pretty, I warned her. Once this starts, I can't control where it ends. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Then make sure it ends where it needs to. That night, I sat in my home office, methodically going through the vault. Every document told a story of corners cut, rules bent, ethics compromised. Marcus had always justified it as business necessity. Now those justifications would be tested. My phone buzzed with a text from Bradley. Hey, Mr. Chen. Excited to work with you. Dad says you'll show me everything I need to know. Let's grab coffee Monday morning. I stared at the message, thinking about the eager 24-year-old who had no idea what he was walking into. Bradley wasn't a bad kid, really. Just privileged, entitled, raised to believe the world would bend to his will because it always had. Looking forward to it, I replied. There's a lot to cover. I turned back to my computer, beginning the process of organizing 12 years of secrets into a training program that would change everything. By the time I finished, the sun was rising, casting long shadows across my desk. Marcus wanted me to train his son. Fine. I would show Bradley everything. Every shortcut, every scheme, every buried secret that had built Weber Construction into what it was today. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about revealing the truth and letting the chips fall where they may. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough. I started with the basics, our accounting software, filing systems, standard procedures. Bradley took notes dutifully, though I could see his attention wandering whenever we discussed anything too technical. By lunch, we barely scratched the surface. This is more complicated than I expected, he admitted as we reviewed vendor contracts. Especially when we get to the special projects file. That caught his attention. Special projects. I nodded, pulling up a folder on my computer. Your father's preferred term for certain creative accounting solutions. For example, the Thompson Heights development. Bradley leaned forward. What about it? Well, I said, turning my monitor so he could see. Officially, the project came in under budget. Unofficially, I pulled up two spreadsheets side by side. Notice anything unusual? His brow furrowed as he studied the numbers. Then his eyes widened. These don't match. The materials costs are completely different. Yes, I said calmly. One version went to the client. The other version shows the actual costs. Your father calls it margin optimization. But that's, Bradley trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the word fraud. Standard practice here, I finished for him. There are dozens of projects like this. I've documented all of them, of course. For training purposes, the color drained from Bradley's face. Does Dad know you keep records like this? Your father trusts me to be thorough, I replied. Speaking of which, should we look at the Anderson merger next? Bradley shifted in his seat. Maybe we should take a break. Of course. Take some time to process what you've learned. We've got plenty more to cover. As he practically fled my office, I began the next phase of my plan. I sent an email to Marcus, copying the board. Daily training update, reviewed basic accounting procedures and project documentation methods with Bradley. He's showing great interest in our financial tracking systems. Tomorrow, special projects and merger preparation. The response was almost immediate. Marcus appeared in my doorway, his usual smooth confidence replaced by barely concealed anxiety. David, a word. I gestured to the chair Bradley had vacated. Of course, how can I help? About the training, he began carefully. Perhaps we should focus on the basics. Standard procedures, routine operations. No need to overwhelm Bradley with historical details. I raised an eyebrow. Historical details like Thompson Heights or the Anderson merger. But you wanted him to handle everything, Marcus. Those are rather significant parts of our operation. His face tightened. I'm still CEO, David. I decide what Bradley needs to know. Of course, I agreed pleasantly. But as you said, he'll be CFO. The board will expect him to understand all aspects of our finances. Unless, I paused deliberately, there are aspects you prefer remain private? Marcus stood abruptly. Modify the training plan. Basics only. That's an order. After you left, I sent another email, this time to Linda in HR. Please document that CEO Marcus Weber has requested modification to CFO training program, specifically excluding key operational and financial details. Copying board for transparency. By the end of the day, Bradley hadn't returned. Instead, I received a text from him. Had to leave early. Not feeling well. See you tomorrow? I worked late that night, methodically organizing more documents, more evidence. Each file told part of a larger story, one of systematic deception that had enriched Marcus Weber at the expense of clients, contractors, and shareholders. The next morning, Bradley didn't show up at all. Neither did Marcus, but the board requested an emergency meeting. I arrived at the conference room to find a tense atmosphere. The board members sat stone-faced around the table. Marcus occupied his usual place at the head, looking like he'd aged years overnight. Bradley sat beside him, pale and uncomfortable. Mr. Chen, the board chairman, began. We've been reviewing your training updates. It seems there are some concerning elements in our financial history that require explanation. I opened my laptop. I have everything documented if you'd like to review it. For the next 2 hours, I walked them through 12 years of carefully preserved evidence. Project after project where costs were inflated, profits hidden, contracts manipulated. The Thompson Heights development was just the tip of the iceberg. When I reached the Anderson merger files, Marcus finally broke. Enough. This is a witch hunt. David's bitter about being replaced, trying to cause trouble. These documents all bear your signature, Marcus. I interrupted quietly. Every decision, every creative solution, every hidden transaction. I was very thorough in my record keeping. For training purposes, of course. Bradley looked like he might be sick. Dad, is this true? Did you really? The board chairman cleared his throat. I think we've seen enough. Marcus, we'll need your resignation, effective immediately. Bradley, given the circumstances, I think it's best if you pursue opportunities elsewhere. Marcus leaped to his feet. You can't do this. This company is my life's work. Built on fraud, the chairman replied coldly. Be grateful we're not involving the authorities. Yet. I gathered my things, preparing to leave, but the chairman stopped me. Mr. Chen, the board would like to discuss your continued employment with Weber Construction in a different capacity. 2 weeks later, I sat in my new office, the CEO's office, looking out over the city. The transition hadn't been smooth. Several projects had to be restructured, clients contacted, contracts renegotiated. But the company would survive, stronger and more ethical than before. Marcus and Bradley had disappeared to their beach house, presumably to plan their next move. I'd heard through the grapevine that Bradley was considering law school, a fresh start, away from his father's influence. Sarah came to visit me at lunch, bringing takeout from our favorite place. "How does it feel?" she asked, gesturing to the CEO nameplate on my desk. I thought about the past 12 years, about loyalty and betrayal, about choices and consequences. "It feels right," I said finally, like everything happened exactly as it should have. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Bradley. I didn't know about any of it. I thought Dad was just really good at business. "Thank you for showing me the truth, even though it hurt. I'm starting over, doing things the right way this time." I sat back in my chair, thinking about the young man who'd bounced into my office just weeks ago, full of entitlement and naive ambition. Sometimes the harshest lessons are the most valuable. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. The Thompson Heights clients called. They want to meet about the discrepancies in their project costs. "Schedule it," I replied. It's time for Weber Construction to make things right. The sun was setting as I packed up for the day, casting long shadows across my new office. On my desk sat a framed photo of my family. The reason I documented everything, protected myself all these years. They deserved a father they could be proud of, someone who stood up for what was right, even when it was hard. Marcus had been right about one thing: blood is thicker than water. But integrity? That's thicker than both. As I walked to my car that evening, I passed the building's directory. The brass plaque still read Weber Construction. But everything else had changed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's legacy. It's about building your own, the right way. I smiled, thinking about the months ahead. There was still work to be done, wrongs to right, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in 12 years, I could do it all without compromising my principles. Sometimes life's greatest victories come not from what we take, but from what we refuse to give up. Our integrity, our values, our truth. Marcus Weber had taught me that lesson, though not in the way he'd intended. And now I could finally put those lessons to good use, building something better from the ashes of his deception. The future looked bright indeed.